On the day of his wedding, billionaire CEO Ethan Thompson had everything: wealth, power, and a perfect fiancée. But a sudden accident changed everything. Waking up in a hospital, unable to move, he found an unexpected ally in Sarah, a compassionate cleaner. As secrets unravel, so does a conspiracy that nearly cost him his life. Will Ethan reclaim his future and his heart? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The morning sun illuminated the gardens of the Thompson estate, where hundreds of white flower arrangements decorated the path to the altar. Ethan Thompson, at 32 years old, adjusted his Italian silk tie one last time in front of the mirror. His reflection revealed not only the impeccable designer suit, but also the face of someone who had achieved everything he had ever dreamed of. He was the CEO of one of the largest technology companies in the country, was about to marry Olivia Rothschild, and his fortune only grew. "It's almost time," said Jake, his best friend and best man, entering the room. "The guests are already arriving." Ethan smiled, but there was something in his eyes that betrayed uneasiness. Perhaps it was just the natural nervousness of a groom, but an inner voice insisted on questioning whether Olivia was really the right person. In recent months, since he had taken over the presidency of the company, she seemed more interested in appearing in the society columns than in building a life together. "I need to take a walk before the ceremony," said Ethan, grabbing the keys to his red Ferrari. Jake tried to argue that it wasn't a good idea, but he knew his friend well enough to know it was useless to try to stop him. The route along the winding road leading to the mansion had always been his refuge to organize his thoughts. The cool morning breeze came in through the car windows, bringing the scent of the ocean. Ethan slowed down as he approached a curve when a dog unexpectedly appeared on the road. As he swerved, he lost control of the vehicle. The world spun in slow motion. The impact was violent, and the last thing Ethan saw was the blue sky through the shattered windshield. At St. Luke's Hospital, the routine followed its normal flow. Sarah Miller, 28 years old, pushed her cleaning cart through the corridors of the ICU ward. Her brown hair was tied in a simple bun, and her light blue uniform contrasted with her tanned skin. Unlike many who worked there, she always dedicated a few minutes to talk to the patients, even those who were unconscious. The agitated arrival of a medical team caught her attention. She quickly moved her cart to make way for the stretcher carrying a young, well-dressed man, apparently the victim of a serious accident. In the hours that followed, the hospital was taken over by reporters and photographers. The patient was Ethan Thompson, the billionaire who should have been getting married at that moment. Sarah observed from afar the coming and going of important people, including an elegant woman who arrived crying dramatically but didn't stay more than 15 minutes. At night, when the movement died down, Sarah entered the room to clean. She looked at the unconscious man in the bed and felt an inexplicable compassion. As she wiped the bedside table, she began to speak softly. "You know, Mr. Thompson, you chose a pretty important day to end up here. But don't worry, there are a lot of people rooting for your recovery." She had no idea that those simple words would mark the beginning of a story that would change not only Ethan's life, but her own. In the days that followed, while the world speculated about the future of the Thompson empire, something much more valuable than any fortune would be born. Inside that hospital room, the night was advancing and Sarah finished her shift with one last look at the patient. "See you tomorrow, Mr. Thompson. Tomorrow I'll bring a book to read to you. Did you know they say people in comas can hear?" Outside the hospital, photographers were still on stakeout, eager for any news about the billionaire's health condition. But the true story, the one no one could have predicted, was just beginning to unfold in the silent corridors of that ICU. The days turned into weeks, and room 507 of the ICU became the stage for a parade of contrasting personalities. Olivia Rothschild. The fiancée always appeared during the hours when there was the most press movement, wearing impeccable clothes and perfect makeup, as if each visit were a photo shoot. "My love, you need to wake up," she would say, fixing her hair, while a photographer from Society and Power magazine captured the moment. "How am I going to organize our wedding without you?" Sarah, who was cleaning the corridor near the room, couldn't help but overhear these theatrical visits. She noticed how Olivia constantly checked her cell phone and barely touched Ethan. As soon as the cameras moved away, she would quickly say goodbye, always with an excuse about unavoidable commitments. During the night shifts, when silence dominated the hospital, Sarah took advantage of her breaks to enter room 507. She always carried a different book, borrowed from the public library near her house. She started with The Little Prince, her favorite story. What is essential is invisible to the eye, she read in a low voice, sitting in the armchair next to the bed. You know, Mr. Thompson, sometimes I think you might be listening. It must be hard to be here alone for so long. One night, Sarah noticed a subtle change in Ethan's expression. She immediately called the on-duty nurse, but the doctors assured her it was just an involuntary reflex. Even so, she maintained her routine of readings and conversations. Meanwhile, behind the scenes of the Thompson empire, suspicious movements began to happen. Alexander, Ethan's older brother, called an extraordinary meeting of the administrative board. With an old power of attorney in hand, he gradually began to take control of the companies. It's just temporary, he assured the shareholders, until my brother recovers. But his eyes revealed other intentions, especially when he met secretly with Michael Davis, Ethan's main competitor in the market. Alexander's visits to the hospital became increasingly rare, always accompanied by lawyers and papers for signature. Sarah observed everything with a mixture of concern and indignation. During her nightly conversations with Ethan, she shared her impressions. You have so many people around you, but sometimes you seem so alone, she commented while arranging the wilted flowers that Olivia had brought for the photos. But don't worry, as long as I'm here, you'll have company. One night, while reading Don Quixote, Sarah was surprised by a conversation in the corridor. Olivia was arguing with Alexander in raised tones. We need to resolve this soon, she was saying. I can't keep waiting indefinitely. The press is already starting to speculate about the wedding. Be patient, Alexander replied. Soon we'll have total control, and you'll have your part, as we agreed. Sarah felt her heart tighten. Those words revealed much more than just concern for Ethan's health. She then decided that in addition to the readings, she would start telling Ethan everything she witnessed, hoping that somehow he could hear and understand. You need to wake up, she whispered gently, holding his hand. There's a lot going on that you need to know. That night, for the first time, Sarah felt a slight squeeze on her hand. It was so subtle that she could have imagined it, but her heart knew it was real. The heart monitor registered a small change, and she smiled, keeping that moment as a precious secret between them. Outside the hospital, life went on. The headlines about the billionaire in a coma were beginning to lose space to other scandals. But in the corridors of St. Luke's, a story of loyalty and true affection continued to develop, silent and deep, like the words of the books Sarah read every night. Autumn arrived in New York City, painting the trees in the hospital garden with golden hues. It had been 2 months since the accident, and the routine in room 507 had become a part of Sarah's life. When she was promoted to work in the hospital's administrative department, she worried about not being able to continue her visits to Ethan. So she volunteered to help with patient care after her regular shift, dedicating those extra hours exclusively to room 507. The head nurse, Martha, who had worked at St. Luke's for 25 years, noticed Sarah's dedication. I've never seen someone so committed to a patient who isn't even family, she commented one evening. Sarah blushed slightly. I just think everyone deserves to have someone care about them, Martha smiled knowingly. Sometimes, dear, the bonds we form with strangers are stronger than those with the people who are supposed to love us. That same week, a series of worrying events began to unfold. Dr. Peterson, who had been treating Ethan since the accident, was suddenly replaced by a new doctor, Dr. Roberts, who seemed oddly close to Alexander Thompson. The new doctor began to suggest transferring Ethan to a long-term care facility far from the city. His condition is stable, but there are no signs of improvement, Dr. Roberts explained to Alexander and Olivia during a visit. Her specialized facility might be more appropriate at this point. Sarah, who was organizing some papers nearby, couldn't believe what she was hearing. A transfer would mean separating Ethan from the care team that knew him best, and from her. Later, that night she sat beside Ethan's bed, her voice more urgent than usual. You can't leave now, she said, holding his hand. I know you're in there fighting to come back. Please, give me a sign, any sign." She watched his face intently, hoping for any reaction. And then it happened. Ethan's eyelids fluttered slightly. It wasn't just a reflex, it was a response. With her heart pounding, Sarah pressed the call button. Dr. Peterson, who was still on call, came immediately. "His brain activity is increasing," the doctor confirmed after checking the monitors. "These are promising signs, but we need to be cautious." The next morning, when Alexander and Dr. Roberts arrived with the transfer papers, they were met by Dr. Peterson. "I don't recommend moving the patient at this time," he said firmly. "There are indications of potential consciousness recovery." Alexander's face darkened. "With all due respect, doctor, we've been waiting for 2 months. The company is suffering, without a leader, and the board is pressuring for decisions." "1 more week," Dr. Peterson insisted. "Give him 1 more week before making any decisions." Reluctantly, Alexander agreed, but Sarah could see the anger in his eyes. She realized that time was running out for Ethan. That evening, after her shift, Sarah discovered that her access to the ICU had been restricted, a new directive allegedly from hospital management. But Martha, who had become her ally, slipped her an access card. "Just be careful," the older nurse warned. "Something doesn't feel right about all this." When Sarah entered room 507 that night, she found Ethan alone with the monitors showing more activity than usual. She sat beside him and opened a notebook. "I've been documenting everything, Ethan," she said, her voice a mix of determination and fear. "Your brother's meetings, the documents they've been bringing for signature, the changes in your company's stocks. I don't understand all of it, but I know it's not good." She hadn't told anyone about her suspicions, fearing no one would believe a simple hospital employee over the powerful Thompson family. "I wish I knew who to trust," she continued. "There's your friend Jake. He's come a few times, but Alexander, always make sure they're never alone with you." As she spoke, she noticed Ethan's fingers moving slightly. Hope surged through her, but she reminded herself not to get too excited. "If you can hear me, Ethan, I want you to know that I'm not giving up on you. Somehow we'll figure this out together." She gently squeezed his hand, and to her astonishment, he squeezed back, not weakly this time, but with definite pressure. Sarah gasped, tears springing to her eyes. "Ethan, can you hear me?" His eyelids fluttered again, and this time, they opened. Just a crack. Disoriented blue eyes looked back at her for just a moment, before closing again. It wasn't imagination or wishful thinking. Ethan Thompson was waking up. Sarah quickly called for Dr. Peterson, who came running. After examining Ethan, he confirmed what Sarah already knew. Ethan was emerging from his coma. "This is remarkable," the doctor said, checking the readings. "The next 24 hours will be critical." Sarah stayed by Ethan's side all night, watching as he showed more and more signs of consciousness. By morning, he was able to open his eyes for longer periods, though he still couldn't speak or move much. When Alexander and Olivia arrived, they were shocked to find Ethan awake and Dr. Peterson explaining the situation. "It's a miracle," Olivia exclaimed for the benefit of the reporters waiting outside. But her eyes showed no joy, only calculation. Alexander looked even more disturbed. That's wonderful news. When will he be able to resume his duties?" Dr. Peterson shook his head. "Recovery from a coma is a long process, Mr. Thompson. Your brother will need extensive therapy and time to regain his functions." Sarah stood quietly in the corner of the room, watching as Ethan's gaze drifted around, taking in the faces surrounding him. When his eyes met hers, she saw something that the others missed: recognition. In that moment, she knew that all those nights of reading and talking hadn't been in vain. Ethan had heard her, and now, against all odds, he was fighting his way back to a world that had almost forgotten him, a world where danger awaited, hidden behind the smiles of those who were supposed to love him most. But he wouldn't face it alone. Without saying a word, Sarah made him a promise with her eyes. She would be there helping him piece together the truth no matter what it cost her. The news that Ethan Thompson had awakened from his coma spread quickly through New York's elite circles, the hospital lobby filled with reporters, business associates and curious onlookers, all eager for a glimpse of the man who had defied death. Dr. Peterson established strict visitation rules. Only family members and medical staff were allowed in Ethan's room, and only for short periods. This meant Alexander and Olivia could maintain their facade of concerned brother and devoted fiancé, but it also meant Sarah's access to Ethan was severely limited. His recovery will be slow, Dr. Peterson explained during a meeting with Alexander and Olivia. He may experience confusion, memory gaps, and physical weakness. It could be months before he's back to his former self, if ever. Alexander nodded with feigned concern. Of course, doctor. We'll make sure he gets the best care possible. When? Will he be able to speak? Olivia asked, twisting her diamond engagement ring nervously. It's hard to say. Some patients recover speech quickly, others take much longer. What none of them realized was that Ethan could already understand everything happening around him. He just couldn't respond yet. His mind was trapped in a body that wouldn't cooperate, like being underwater and unable to call for help. But there was one person who seemed to sense this. During her administrative shifts, Sarah found reasons to deliver paperwork to Ethan's new room, now on the recovery floor. She would make eye contact with him, and in those brief moments, a silent communication passed between them. Late one evening, when most of the staff had gone home, Sarah slipped into Ethan's room with her notebook. "Mr. Thompson," she whispered, checking to make sure they were alone. "I don't know how much you remember, but things aren't right with your company. Your brother has been making deals with Michael Davis, your competitor. I've been keeping notes on everything I've heard." Ethan's eyes widened slightly. He tried to speak, but only a raspy sound came out. "Don't strain yourself," Sarah said, gently touching his arm. "Just blink once for yes and twice for no. Do you remember me?" Ethan blinked once firmly. Sarah's heart soared. "Do you remember what happened? The accident?" One blink. "Do you trust your brother Alexander?" Two blinks, emphatic. "Your fiancée, Olivia?" Two more blinks. Sarah took a deep breath. "I need to find someone you trust who can help us. Your friend Jake. Is he trustworthy?" Ethan blinked once, then made a struggling motion with his hand. Sarah quickly gave him a pen and held her notebook where he could reach it. With tremendous effort, he scratched out a wobbly word. "Lawyer? Your lawyer? You want me to contact your lawyer?" One blink. "Do you remember their name?" Ethan struggled again with the pen. "Reynolds." Sarah nodded. "I'll find them. I promise." Just then, footsteps sounded in the hallway. Sarah quickly hid the notebook and pretended to be adjusting Ethan's pillows as a night nurse entered. "Visiting hours are over," the nurse said suspiciously. "I was just finishing up," Sarah replied with a professional smile. Mr. Thompson needed his pillows adjusted. As she left, she cast one last glance at Ethan, who gave her the slightest nod. Their alliance was sealed. The next day, Sarah used her lunch break to visit the public library. She searched online for Reynolds lawyer Thompson and found several articles mentioning William Reynolds, Ethan's longtime legal counsel. Unfortunately, when she called his office, the receptionist informed her that Mr. Reynolds had left on an extended vacation to Europe immediately after Ethan's accident, at Alexander Thompson's suggestion. That evening, Sarah returned to Ethan's room with the disappointing news. "Reynolds is unreachable," she whispered. "But I did find something else. Your company's stock has dropped 30% since your accident, and Alexander has been selling his shares quietly. It's like he's preparing for something." Ethan's face showed alarm. He reached for the pen again, his movements slightly stronger than the day before. This time he wrote, "Jake, bring him." "I'll try," Sarah promised. Finding Jake proved difficult. Sarah didn't even know his last name, but fortune smiled on her when she overheard a nurse mention that Mr. Thompson's loud friend had been turned away at reception earlier that day because he wasn't on the approved visitors list. Sarah waited by the hospital entrance after her shift, hoping Jake might return. 3 hours later, her patience was rewarded when a tall man with dark hair approached the reception desk, arguing about seeing Ethan. "Excuse me," Sarah said, approaching him cautiously. "Are you Jake, Ethan Thompson's friend?" The man turned, suspicious. "Who's asking?" "My name is Sarah Miller. I work here at the hospital, and This is going to sound strange, but Ethan needs your help. Jake's expression changed from suspicion to interest. What do you mean? Not here, Sarah whispered, noticing a security camera. Can we talk somewhere private? They went to a small coffee shop across the street. Sarah explained everything. The conversation she'd overheard between Alexander and Olivia, the suspicious doctor, the attempts to transfer Ethan, and most importantly, that Ethan was now conscious and aware of the danger. Jake listened intently, his expression darkening. I knew something wasn't right. Alexander blocked me every time I tried to see Ethan, and when I asked about business matters, he said everything was being handled. That snake. Ethan trusts you, Sarah said. He tried to reach his lawyer, but apparently Alexander sent him on a long vacation. Jake nodded grimly. Reynolds wouldn't just leave, not with Ethan in a coma. Alexander must have gotten to him somehow. What can we do? First, I need to see Ethan. Can you get me in? Sarah thought for a moment. Maybe. There's a service elevator that goes directly to the recovery floor. If we time it right, during shift change. Jake smiled for the first time. You're something else, Sarah. Ethan's lucky to have you in his corner. Sarah blushed. I'm just doing what anyone would do. No, Jake said seriously. You're not. Most people would have looked the other way. You risked your job, maybe more, for someone you barely know. The next evening, Sarah successfully smuggled Jake into Ethan's room during the night shift change. The reunion between the friends was emotional, with Jake gripping Ethan's hand tightly. Damn, man, you had us worried, Jake said, his voice thick with emotion. Ethan's speech was still limited, but he managed to whisper a few words. Company. Danger. I know, Jake assured him. Sarah filled me in. Alexander's been blocking the board members from information, claiming doctor's orders, and he's been making deals with Davis Industries behind everyone's back. With tremendous effort, Ethan pointed to the bedside drawer. Sarah opened it and found a small key hidden beneath some personal items. Safe. Home office, Ethan managed to say. Evidence. Jake nodded in understanding. The safe in your home office? I'll find whatever's in there. Files. Prove. Fraud. Ethan had suspicions about Alexander even before the accident, Jake explained to Sarah. He never trusted him with the company finances. Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of the door opening. Sarah quickly pulled Jake into the bathroom just as Alexander entered with Dr. Roberts. We're moving forward with the transfer to the Lakeside facility tomorrow, Alexander was saying. The paperwork is ready. His condition has improved significantly, Dr. Roberts replied. Are you sure this is necessary? My brother needs specialized care, away from the stress of the city and the constant media attention. The board agrees it's for the best. From their hiding place, Jake and Sarah exchanged alarmed glances. They needed to act fast. After Alexander and the doctor left, Jake emerged from the bathroom, his face grim. They're trying to isolate him completely, he said. Once he's at that facility, they'll control everything. Who sees him, what treatment he receives. We need those files from his safe. Ethan nodded weakly. Trust. Sarah, he whispered. Jake looked at Sarah with new respect. Come with me tonight. We'll go to Ethan's penthouse and get those files. Sarah hesitated. I could lose my job. Or worse. Please, Ethan managed to say, his blue eyes pleading. Need you. Those simple words settled it for Sarah. Okay, I'm in. That night, after making sure Ethan was stable and comfortable, Sarah met Jake outside the hospital. He drove them to Ethan's penthouse in Midtown Manhattan, a stunning glass and steel building that made Sarah feel very small. How will we get in? She asked as they parked. I have a key, Jake explained. Ethan gave it to me years ago for emergencies. The doorman knows me. True to his word, they entered without issue. The doorman greeted Jake warmly and didn't question. Sarah's presence. Ethan's penthouse occupied the entire top floor. The elevator opened directly into a massive living room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Sarah gasped at the luxury surrounding her, all while its owner lay in a hospital bed fighting for his future. Jake led her to the home office, a handsome room lined with bookshelves and featuring a large mahogany desk. The safe should be behind. That painting, Jake said, pointing to a modern abstract on the wall. Sure enough, when they moved the painting, a sleek wall safe was revealed. Jake used the key Ethan had given them, but the safe also required a combination. Did he mention a code? Jake asked, staring at the keypad. Sarah thought back to her conversations with Ethan. No, but wait. The first book I read to him was The Little Prince. He seemed to respond to it. Could that be significant? Jake snapped his fingers. The Little Prince was his mother's favorite book. She used to read it to him when he was a kid. He tried a date. 07 to 10/83, his mother's birthday. The safe clicked open. Inside were several folders labeled with dates and AI project financials, along with a sealed envelope marked in case of emergency. Jake opened the envelope first. Inside was a letter in Ethan's handwriting. If you're reading this, something has happened to me. I've suspected for some time that Alexander has been embezzling from the company through fake R&D projects. The evidence is in these files, transactions that don't match our actual research costs. I plan to confront him after my honeymoon, but if you're reading this, I didn't get the chance. Take this to Bennett at the SEC, no one else. Trust. No one within the company except Jake Miller, and whoever you are, thank you for being the friend I needed. Jake looked up from the letter, his expression somber. He knew Alexander was stealing, but he didn't know how deep it went. With these files, we can stop him. As they gathered the documents, they heard the elevator doors open in the living room. Sarah froze in panic. Who else has access to this apartment? She whispered. Only Olivia, Jake replied, quickly stuffing the folders into a backpack. We need to hide. But before they could move, Olivia's voice rang out along with another familiar one, Alexander's. Just grab anything valuable, Alexander was saying. We won't have access after tomorrow once he's transferred. What about his accounts, the offshore ones? Olivia asked. We'll need his signatures for those. But don't worry, in his condition it won't be hard to manage. And if he recovers more, if he starts talking, Alexander's voice turned cold. The doctors at Lakeside are very cooperative. He'll be kept comfortable but confused. No one questions. Medication dosages for brain injury patients. Sarah covered her mouth to stifle a gasp. They were planning to drug Ethan to keep him incapacitated. Jake pulled her toward a small door she hadn't noticed, a storage closet. They slipped inside, just as Alexander and Olivia entered the office. The safe first, Alexander said. He keeps all his important documents there. They heard him trying various combinations, cursing when none worked. We'll bring a locksmith tomorrow, he finally decided. For now, take the watches, the art from the living room, anything small and valuable. From their hiding place, Sarah and Jake waited, barely breathing, as Alexander and Olivia ransacked the apartment. After what seemed like hours, they finally heard the elevator doors close. That was close, Jake whispered, stepping out of the closet. We need to get these files to the SEC right away. No, Sarah said firmly. First, we need to stop them from transferring Ethan tomorrow. If they get him to that lakeside place... Jake nodded grimly. You're right. Let's split up. I'll take the files somewhere safe and contact Bennett at the SEC first thing in the morning. You go back to the hospital and stay with Ethan. Don't let them move him, no matter what. Sarah nodded, though she wasn't sure how she would stop a hospital transfer approved by Ethan's legal next of kin. They left the penthouse separately, Sarah clutching a small recorder Jake had found in Ethan's desk. On it, they'd saved Alexander and Olivia's incriminating conversation. Proof of their intentions that might help convince the hospital administration. The taxi ride back to St. Luke's seemed to take forever. Sarah's mind raced with possible scenarios, none of them good. How could she, a simple hospital employee, stand against the powerful Thompson family? When she arrived, the hospital was quiet, most patients asleep. She made her way to Ethan's room, relieved to find him still there, dozing, fitfully. His eyes opened when she entered, instantly alert. We got the files, she whispered, sitting beside him. And we overheard Alexander and Olivia. They're planning to keep you drugged at this new facility. Anger flashed in Ethan's eyes. With visible effort, he rasped, Help! Me! Sit! Sarah carefully raised the head of the bed and supported Ethan as he struggled to a sitting position. His strength was returning slowly, too slowly for their current crisis. "They're coming tomorrow," he managed to say. "I know. Jake is taking the files to the SEC, but that won't happen until morning. We need to stop the transfer." Ethan's brow furrowed in concentration. "Martha," he said finally. "The head nurse? You think she can help?" He nodded. Sarah thought for a moment. Martha had been kind to her, had noticed her dedication to Ethan. Maybe she would listen. She found Martha at the nurse's station, reviewing charts for the night shift. "Martha, I need to talk to you," Sarah said urgently. "It's about Ethan Thompson." The older nurse looked up, concern in her eyes. "What's wrong, dear?" Sarah took a deep breath and told Martha everything. About Alexander's plans, about the overheard conversation, about Ethan's recovery being stronger than they were letting on. She played the recording from the penthouse. Martha listened without interrupting, her expression growing more troubled by the minute. "That's a serious accusation against a powerful family," she said when Sarah finished. "I know how it sounds," Sarah admitted. "But Ethan is conscious and aware. He's trying to communicate. He doesn't want this transfer." Martha studied her face. "You care about him, don't you, beyond professional concern?" Sarah blushed but didn't deny it. "He's a good person who's being betrayed by the people who should love him most. I can't stand by and let that happen." After a long moment, Martha nodded. "Dr. Peterson is on call tonight. He should hear this." Dr. Peterson's reaction was one of controlled fury. "I never trusted that Dr. Roberts," he said after listening to the recording. "He appeared too suddenly, with too many convenient credentials." "What can we do?" Sarah asked. "The transfer papers are signed." "Not by me," Dr. Peterson said firmly. "And as Ethan's primary physician, my medical opinion carries weight. I'll place a temporary hold on any transfer, citing medical concerns." "Will that be enough?" Martha asked. "It will buy us time," the doctor replied. "Time for your friend to reach the SEC and for me to conduct a new evaluation of Ethan's condition, one that accurately reflects his improvement." Sarah felt a weight lift from her shoulders. They had allies now, people with authority who could help protect Ethan. When she returned to Ethan's room, she found him awake, anxiously waiting for news. "Dr. Peterson is going to help," she told him, taking his hand. "He's blocking the transfer." Relief washed over Ethan's face. He squeezed her hand, stronger than before, and managed 3 clear words. "Thank you, Sarah." The simple gratitude in his voice moved her deeply. In that moment, Sarah realized that what had begun as compassion for a helpless patient had grown into something much more powerful. She was fighting not just for justice, but for Ethan himself, for the man whose quiet strength and kindness had touched her heart, even through the silence of his coma. Dawn broke over the city, painting the hospital room in soft golden light. Sarah had stayed all night, dozing occasionally in the chair beside Ethan's bed, unwilling to leave him vulnerable. The morning brought both hope and danger. Jake called to say he had delivered the files to Bennett at the SEC, who was already moving to freeze the Thompson Company assets and launch an investigation. But Alexander wasn't giving up easily. He arrived at 8 a.m. sharp with Dr. Roberts and 2 men in orderly uniforms, clearly private staff, not hospital employees. "We're here to transport my brother," he announced coldly when he found Sarah in the room. "I'm afraid that won't be possible today," Dr. Peterson said, entering behind them. "I've placed a medical hold on any transfer. Mr. Thompson's condition has improved significantly, and moving him would be detrimental to his recovery." Alexander's face darkened with rage. "You have no right—" "I have every right as his physician," Dr. Peterson interrupted, "and I've already filed my concerns with the hospital board." "This is temporary," Alexander snarled. "I'll have this overturned by noon." "Perhaps," Dr. Peterson replied calmly. "But by then you may have more pressing concerns." As if on cue, Martha appeared at the door. "Mr. Thompson, there are some gentlemen from the Securities and Exchange Commission here to see you. They say it's urgent." The color drained from Alexander's face. He looked at Ethan, who was now sitting up in bed, his eyes clear and focused. "You," Alexander whispered, "you did this somehow." Ethan couldn't respond with more than a look, but that look said everything. The game was over. as Alexander was escorted. Out to meet the SEC investigators, Sarah stood by Ethan's side, their hands entwined. The road to recovery, both physical and financial, would be long and difficult, but for the first time since the accident, the future held promise instead of threat. That night, after the drama had settled, Sarah sat with Ethan in the quiet of his hospital room. His speech was improving hourly, and he was determined to tell her something. "When I was in the coma," he said slowly, each word an effort, "your voice was my anchor. You gave me something to fight for." Sarah smiled, tears gathering in her eyes. "I was just doing my job." Ethan shook his head. "No, you saved me. In every way a person can be saved." He reached for her hand, and as their fingers intertwined, Sarah knew that what had begun in the silence of room 507 was only the beginning of their story. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The billionaire and the cleaning lady who had awakened much more than just his consciousness. 2 weeks had passed since the SEC began their investigation into Alexander Thompson's activities. The headlines in the New York business papers told the story in bold letters. Thompson tech scandal, CEO's brother accused of massive fraud, betrayal in the boardroom, Thompson empire in crisis, coma and corporate corruption, the Ethan Thompson story. For Ethan, each day brought new progress. He had been moved from St. Luke's Hospital to a private rehabilitation center where he worked tirelessly with physical therapists to regain his strength and coordination. His speech had improved dramatically, though he still struggled with fatigue and occasional memory gaps. Sarah had taken a leave of absence from her job at the hospital to help with Ethan's recovery. She coordinated with his medical team, managed the endless stream of legal meetings, and most importantly, provided the emotional support he needed to face each challenging day. "You don't have to do all this," Ethan told her one afternoon as they sat in the center's garden. The autumn sun was warm on their faces, a gentle breeze stirring the colorful leaves around them. "I know I don't have to," Sarah replied with a smile. "I want to." Ethan studied her face, still amazed by the twist of fate that had brought this remarkable woman into his life. "What did I do to deserve you?" Sarah laughed softly. "You were unconscious, actually. Not much you could do either way." He reached for her hand, his grip much stronger than it had been just days before. "When this is all over, when I'm back on my feet and the company is stable again, we need to talk about the future." "What do you mean?" Before Ethan could answer, they were interrupted by the arrival of Jake, who had been overseeing the day-to-day operations at Thompson Tech during Ethan's recovery. "Sorry to break up this cozy scene," Jake said, dropping into a chair beside them, "but we've got updates." The expression on his face told them the news wasn't entirely good. "The SEC investigation is going well. They've frozen most of Alexander's assets and recovered about 60% of what he stole. But he's disappeared." "What do you mean disappeared?" Sarah asked, alarmed. "He missed his scheduled interview with the investigators yesterday. When they went to his apartment, it was cleared out. Looks like he left in a hurry." Ethan's jaw tightened. "And Olivia? No sign of her either. Her social media has gone dark, and her friends claim they haven't heard from her." "They're running," Ethan said grimly. "Together." Jake nodded. "Most likely. The good news is that Bennett from the SEC says they have enough evidence to proceed without their testimony. The paper trail is damning." "What about the company?" Ethan asked, shifting to business mode. The doctors had advised against stressing over work matters, but Thompson Tech employed thousands of people who depended on its stability. The stock took a hit when the scandal broke, but it's stabilizing. "The board wants to meet with you next week to discuss the transition back to your leadership." Ethan nodded, though Sarah noticed the slight tremble in his hand, a sign he was pushing himself too hard. "That's enough business talk for today," she said firmly. "Doctor's orders," Jake grinned. "Yes, Nurse Sarah, whatever you say." After Jake left, Ethan and Sarah continued their walk through the garden, moving slower than they once would have, but appreciating each step forward. "Tell me something," Ethan said after a comfortable silence. "That first night in the hospital, why did you decide to talk to me? I was just another patient." Sarah considered the question. "I don't know exactly. Something about the way everyone came for the cameras, but not really for you. It seemed wrong. Nobody deserves to be alone like that. Even a rich guy who crashed his Ferrari on his wedding day. She smiled. Even him, maybe especially him. Their easy conversation was interrupted by the arrival of an elegant older woman being escorted by one of the center's staff. "Mr. Thompson, your mother is here to see you." Eleanor Thompson approached them with the graceful bearing that had made her a favorite in New York society pages for decades. Though in her 60s, she remained strikingly beautiful. Her silver hair perfectly styled, her designer outfit impeccable. "Ethan, darling," she said, embracing her son carefully. "You look so much better than when I saw you last week." "I feel better, Mother," Ethan replied, his tone noticeably more formal than it had been with Sarah. "You remember Sarah Miller?" Eleanor's gaze shifted to Sarah, her smile polite but cool. "Of course, the hospital employee who's been so helpful." Sarah felt immediately out of place in her simple sundress beside Eleanor's obvious wealth and refinement. "It's nice to see you again, Mrs. Thompson." "Mother, Sarah is much more than a hospital employee," Ethan said firmly. "She saved my life and my company." Eleanor's expression softened slightly. "Then we owe her a great debt of gratitude." She turned to Sarah. "I hope my son is compensating you adequately for your time." Sarah flushed. "I'm not doing this for compensation, Mrs. Thompson." An awkward silence fell over the group until Ethan spoke again. "Sarah, would you mind giving my mother and me a few minutes alone? There are some family matters we need to discuss." Though hurt by the dismissal, Sarah nodded. "Of course. I'll wait in the cafeteria." As she walked away, she could feel Eleanor Thompson's calculating gaze on her back. In the cafeteria, Sarah stirred her coffee absently, troubled by the interaction with Ethan's mother. She'd known from the beginning that their worlds were vastly different. Ethan was born to wealth and privilege. She had grown up in a struggling middle-class family and worked hard for everything she had. Could those differences ever truly be bridged? Her thoughts were interrupted when Martha, her former supervisor from St. Luke's, unexpectedly appeared at her table. "Martha, what are you doing here?" The older nurse smiled warmly. "I was visiting another former patient and heard you. We're here with Ethan Thompson. Thought I'd say hello." Sarah welcomed the distraction. "It's so good to see you. How are things at the hospital?" "Much the same, but I'm more interested in how you're doing. This has been quite a change for you." Sarah sighed. "It's been overwhelming sometimes. Ethan's world is so different from mine." Martha nodded, understanding. "I can imagine. The Thompsons have been New York royalty for generations. His mother is with him now. She looks at me like I'm something she found on the bottom of her designer shoe." "And how does Ethan look at you?" Sarah couldn't help the smile that came to her lips. "Like I'm the most important person in the room." "Then that's what matters," Martha said simply. "Love doesn't care about bank accounts or social standing." "Love?" Sarah echoed, startled by the word. "I didn't say anything about love." Martha gave her a knowing look. "You didn't have to, dear." Before Sarah could respond, her phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. "Where are you? Mother's gone. Can you come back?" She said goodbye to Martha and hurried back to the garden where she found Ethan looking troubled. "Is everything okay?" she asked. "No," he said bluntly. "Mother brought some disturbing news. Alexander has been spotted in Switzerland, withdrawing funds from an account I didn't know existed. And Olivia has been contacting the tabloids, apparently ready to tell her side of the story." Sarah sat beside him. What could she possibly say? The evidence against them is clear. It's not about the legal case, it's about public opinion. Ethan ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "She's claiming our engagement was already over before the accident, that she only maintained the pretense out of loyalty while I was in the coma. She's trying to rewrite history to save her reputation. Does it matter what she says? To the company, yes. Our stock price is influenced by public perception. A messy scandal could undo all the stabilization we've achieved." Sarah took his hand. "What did your mother suggest?" Ethan's expression darkened. "A counter-narrative. She wants to arrange a sympathetic interview where I present myself as the betrayed fiancé, who's now focused solely on recovery and rebuilding the company." "That sounds reasonable. There's more. She thinks I should distance myself from distractions, meaning you. She believes your presence feeds into a gossip narrative that could damage the company's image." Sarah felt as if she'd been slapped. "Oh, it's ridiculous," Ethan said quickly. "I told her you're not going anywhere unless you choose to leave." "But she's right about how it looks," Sarah said quietly. "The CEO and the cleaning lady, it's like something from a trashy novel. I don't care how it looks. Maybe you should." Sarah stood up, suddenly needing space. "Your company affects thousands of lives. If my presence complicates the recovery—" "Stop," Ethan said firmly. "My mother has always been obsessed with appearances. But I've learned something important from this whole ordeal. What looks perfect on the outside can be rotten at the core." He reached for her hand, pulling her gently back to sit beside him. Olivia was the perfect society match. Everyone said so, but when I needed someone to fight for me, to believe in me, it wasn't her, it was you. Sarah wanted to believe him, but doubts crept in. What happens when you're fully recovered? When you go back to board meetings and charity galas? "I don't fit into that world, Ethan." "Then maybe it's time to change that world," he said simply. Before Sarah could respond, they were interrupted again, this time by someone completely unexpected. "Mr. Thompson, there's a Ms. Rachel Davis here to see you. She says it's urgent." Rachel Davis, the name struck Sarah immediately. Michael Davis was the competitor Alexander had been secretly meeting with. What was his daughter doing here? A beautiful young woman in her late 20s approached them, her expression anxious. "Ethan, I'm sorry to show up unannounced. I didn't know where else to go." Ethan looked confused. "Rachel? What's wrong?" "It's my father. He's been acting strange ever since the news about Alexander broke. Today I found him shredding documents and booking a flight to the Cayman Islands. I think he was involved in whatever Alexander was doing." Ethan introduced Rachel to Sarah, explaining, "Rachel and I grew up together. Our family's companies have been rivals for decades, but we've always been friends." Rachel nodded to Sarah, then continued urgently. "There's more. I found emails between my father and Olivia from before your accident. They were involved. And they were discussing something called Project Phoenix." "Project Phoenix?" Ethan frowned. "That was supposed to be our next major product launch, a revolutionary AI system, but it's still in development. Not according to these emails. They talk about having the full system ready to be patented under Davis Industries instead of Thompson Tech." The implications hit Ethan hard. Corporate espionage. Olivia was feeding information to Michael through Alexander. "It gets worse," Rachel said, pulling out her phone to show them an email. "This is from 3 days before your accident. Olivia wrote to my father, 'Once A handles the final obstacle, the project is yours.'" Sarah gasped. "The final obstacle? Ethan, they were talking about you." "My accident wasn't an accident," Ethan said slowly, the horrible truth dawning on him. "The dog that ran into the road. It was too convenient. I always thought it was strange how it appeared out of nowhere on that empty stretch." "I didn't want to believe my father could be involved in something like this," Rachel said, her voice breaking. "But I couldn't stay silent." Ethan reached out to squeeze her hand gratefully. "You did the right thing, Rachel. We need to take this to the SEC immediately." As Rachel left to meet with Jake and the SEC investigators, Ethan sat in stunned silence, processing the betrayal that went far deeper than he had imagined. "They tried to kill me," he said finally. "Not just steal from me, actually kill me." Sarah moved closer, putting her arm around him. "But they failed. You survived. Because of you." He turned to face her, his eyes intense. "Do you understand? Now why I don't care what my mother or anyone else thinks about us. My perfect fiancée from the right social circle plotted my death. The woman who saved me was a hospital cleaning lady with a bigger heart than anyone I'd ever known." The raw emotion in his voice left Sarah speechless. As the sun began to set over the rehabilitation center gardens, they sat together in silence, both aware that their lives had been forever altered by fate, betrayal, and an unexpected bond that had grown in the unlikeliest of circumstances. That evening, after processing the shocking revelations about his accident, Ethan insisted on speaking with Bennett from the SEC immediately. The investigation was now expanding to include attempted murder and corporate espionage, with international arrest warrants being prepared for Alexander, Olivia, and Michael Davis. "We need to move you to a more secure location," Bennett advised. After hearing the full story, if they were willing to go this far before, they might try again, especially now that they're desperate. Ethan agreed reluctantly. What about Sarah? She could be in danger too. We'll arrange protection for both of you. Within hours, they were relocated to a private estate in Connecticut, owned by a former FBI agent who specialized in high-profile security. The spacious house was surrounded by tall trees and equipped with state-of-the-art security systems. 2 plainclothes officers were assigned to stay on the property at all times. Despite the beautiful surroundings, the atmosphere was tense. Sarah tried to maintain their rehabilitation routine, helping Ethan with his exercises and cognitive therapy, but the weight of the new threats hung over them. "I'm sorry you've been dragged into this," Ethan said one evening as they sat on the terrace watching the sunset. "This isn't what you signed up for." Sarah gave him a wry smile. "Technically, I signed up to clean hospital rooms. Everything since then has been unexpected." "Do you regret it?" he asked, his voice hesitant. "Getting involved?" She considered the question seriously. "No. Despite everything, I don't regret a single moment, which probably makes me crazy." Ethan laughed, a genuine sound that had become more frequent as his recovery progressed. "Then we're both crazy, because despite nearly dying and losing half my company, these past weeks with you have been some of the most real and meaningful of my life." The security guard stationed nearby discreetly moved further away, giving them privacy. "Before the accident," Ethan continued, "my life looked perfect on paper. Successful company, beautiful fiancée, all the trappings of wealth. But something was missing. I felt it that morning. That's why I needed to drive, to think. I was about to marry a woman I wasn't even sure I loved." "And now?" Sarah asked softly. "Now I know what real connection feels like." He took her hand. "When I was in that coma, your voice was like a lifeline. You spoke to me about real things, treated me like a person, not a possession or an obstacle." Sarah felt tears gathering in her eyes. "I just did what felt right." "That's who you are, Sarah. You follow your heart without calculation. Do you know how rare that is in my world?" Their moment was interrupted by the arrival of Jake, who had been coordinating with the SEC and law enforcement from New York. His expression was grim as he approached. "We have a problem," he said without preamble. "Rachel Davis was attacked in her apartment last night," Sarah gasped. "Is she all right?" "She's in the hospital with a concussion, but she'll recover." The attacker took her laptop and phone, the ones with the evidence she showed you. "Michael going after his own daughter," Ethan said, disgusted. "Is there no limit to how low they'll sink?" "That's not all," Jake continued. "They found a list in the attacker's pocket when they arrested him. It had names, both of yours were on it, along with mine and Bennett's. A hit list," Ethan said quietly. "The FBI is taking over the case now. This has escalated beyond financial crimes. The reality of their danger settled over the group like a dark cloud." That night, security around the estate was doubled, with agents patrolling the perimeter continuously. Unable to sleep, Sarah stood by the bedroom window, watching the moonlight cast shadows across the manicured lawn. The past few months felt like a dream, or sometimes a nightmare. How had her simple life turned into this thriller movie scenario, complete with corrupt businessmen and hired attackers? A soft knock at her door made her jump. It was Ethan, also unable to sleep. "I saw your light on," he said. "Mind some company." They sat together on the window seat, the house quiet around them. "I keep thinking about Rachel," Sarah said. "Her own father." "Michael Davis has always been ruthless in business," Ethan replied, "but I never imagined he'd go this far. Thank God she's going to be okay." "What if they come after us next?" Ethan's face hardened with determination. "They won't get the chance. Bennett called while you were in the shower. The FBI raided Michael's office this afternoon. They found a private server with all the Project Phoenix files, proof he was stealing Thompson Tech's intellectual property. Did they find Michael? No, he's in the wind, but they're closing in. His accounts have been frozen, his passport flagged." Sarah leaned against Ethan's shoulder, drawing comfort from his presence. "When does it end? When do we get to stop looking over our shoulders?" "Soon," he promised, though they both knew it wasn't entirely in his control. Bennett thinks they'll have Alexander and Olivia in custody within days. They've tracked them to a hotel in Geneva. And then what? We go back to normal life? Sarah laughed softly at the absurdity. I don't even know what normal looks like anymore. Ethan was quiet for a moment. What would you want it to look like? If you could choose? The question caught her off guard. I haven't really thought about it. Yes, you have, he said gently. I see it in your eyes sometimes. You're wondering where you fit in all this, what happens after the crisis is over. Sarah looked away, uncomfortable with how well he could read her. It's not important right now. It's the only thing that is important. Ethan turned her face back toward him. Sarah, when this is over, when the danger has passed and the company is stable, what do you want? I want... She hesitated, afraid to voice her deepest hopes. I want not to be just a chapter in your recovery story, not the cleaning lady who helped the billionaire when he was down, only to fade away when he didn't need her anymore. Ethan's expression softened. Is that what you think will happen? It's what makes sense. Our worlds are too different. Our worlds, he repeated thoughtfully. Tell me something. In these past months, when we've talked for hours, shared meals, laughed together, worked through problems, whose world were we in? Mine or yours? Sarah considered the question. Neither, or maybe both. Exactly. We created our own world. He took her hands in his. I don't want to go back to my old life, Sarah. That life led me to a loveless engagement and a brother who tried to kill me for money. What I want is to build something new, with you. The intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. Ethan, I'm not asking for an answer tonight, he said quickly. We're still in the middle of this mess, and you deserve time to think clearly, without pressure. But I needed you to know that for me, you were never temporary. You're the future I want to fight for. In the stillness of the night, with moonlight streaming through the windows and danger lurking beyond the walls, Sarah felt something shift inside her, fear giving way to possibility, doubt yielding to hope. Whatever happens, she said softly, we face it together. Ethan's smile lit up his face. Together, he agreed, sealing the promise with a gentle kiss that spoke of new beginnings amidst the chaos. As dawn broke over the Connecticut estate, neither knew what challenges the day would bring, but for the first time, they were looking beyond the crisis to the life they might build when the storm had passed. A life neither had imagined before fate brought them together in room 507. The next morning brought a flurry of activity. Jake arrived early with news. Swiss authorities had raided the hotel in Geneva where Alexander and Olivia had been staying, but they had missed them by mere hours. However, they'd left in such a rush that important evidence had been abandoned, including Olivia's laptop with emails documenting the entire conspiracy. The net is closing, Jake said confidently. They can't run forever. Bennett from the SEC called shortly after with an update on Michael Davis. He tried to board a private plane to Venezuela late last night. FBI agents took him into custody at the airstrip. He's already talking, trying to cut a deal. Is he giving up Alexander and Olivia? Ethan asked. Better than that, he's admitted to planning your accident. Apparently it was Olivia's idea initially, but Alexander refined the plan. They hired someone to release a dog on that specific curve, knowing you always drove too fast there. The confirmation of what they had suspected sent a chill through the room. Sarah gripped Ethan's hand tightly as Bennett continued. We need you both to come in to give formal statements. With Michael's confession and the evidence from Switzerland, we're building an airtight case. Ethan looked at Sarah, concern in his eyes. Is it safe? We'll have a full security detail, Bennett assured them. It's important to move quickly while we have momentum. They agreed to travel to the Federal Building in Manhattan that afternoon. As they prepared to leave the safe house, Sarah found herself oddly reflective, gathering the few belongings she had brought with her. Penny, for your thoughts, Ethan said, finding her staring out the window. I was just thinking about how quickly life can change, she replied. 6 months ago, I was living my simple, ordinary life. Now I'm about to give testimony in a federal investigation involving attempted murder and corporate espionage. Ethan moved closer, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Regretting that, You talked to the unconscious guy in room 507. She leaned back against him, finding comfort in his strength. Never, though I might regret not charging by the hour for my reading services. He laughed, kissing the top of her head. I'm pretty sure the going rate for saving someone's life, company, and sanity is quite high. I'll have accounting work up the numbers. The journey to Manhattan was tense, their SUV sandwiched between two identical vehicles filled with federal agents. The city skyline appeared in the distance, familiar yet somehow changed in Sarah's eyes. Everything looked different now that she had seen behind the glittering facade of wealth and power. At the federal building, they were escorted through a private entrance to avoid the media that had gathered outside. The case had become a national sensation, with business channels covering it around the clock and tabloids speculating wildly about the love triangle between Ethan, Olivia, and the mysterious hospital worker. Sarah gave her statement first, recounting everything from her early conversations with the comatose Ethan to overhearing Alexander and Olivia's plotting. The federal prosecutors asked detailed questions, occasionally exchanging impressed glances at her clear recollection of events. "You have a remarkable memory, Ms. Miller," one of them commented. "These details are extremely helpful. When you spend your days noticing things others miss, you develop an eye for details," she replied simply. When it was Ethan's turn, Sarah waited in a comfortable conference room, mindlessly flipping through a magazine without seeing the pages. The gravity of the situation weighed heavily on her. People had tried to kill Ethan, would still try given the chance. How could they ever truly feel safe again? Her thoughts were interrupted when the door opened, but instead of Ethan or one of the agents, Eleanor Thompson entered the room. Sarah stood quickly, surprised. "Mrs. Thompson, please sit," Eleanor said, her tone gentler than it had been during their last encounter. "I'm not here to cause trouble." Sarah sat cautiously, watching as the elegant older woman took the chair across from her. Today, Eleanor looked less the perfect society matron and more a worried mother, her face showing the strain of recent weeks. "I owe you an apology, Ms. Miller," Eleanor said directly. "I misjudged you and your intentions toward my son." Stunned by the unexpected words, Sarah remained silent as Eleanor continued. "When I first heard about you, I assumed the worst, that you were taking advantage of Ethan's vulnerable state, perhaps seeking financial gain or notoriety." Sarah bristled. "I never—" Eleanor held up a hand. "Please let me finish. I was wrong. The federal agents briefed me on your statement and the risks you've taken to protect my son. No one does that for money or fame." The admission clearly cost Eleanor some pride, but her voice remained steady. "Ethan told me how you sat with him night after night when he was in the coma, how you were the only one who treated him like a person, rather than a problem or an opportunity. I didn't want to believe it because it meant acknowledging how wrong I was about Olivia, about the kind of people I encouraged him to surround himself with." Sarah softened slightly. "You wanted what was best for your son." "I wanted what I thought was best," Eleanor corrected. "There's a difference. I wanted him to marry someone from our social circle, someone who understood our world. Instead, I practically pushed him into the arms of a woman who tried to kill him." Tears gathered in Eleanor's eyes, a crack in her perfect composure. You know what the worst part is? I never even liked Olivia. I thought she was cold, but I overlooked it because she came from the right family, went to the right schools. What kind of mother does that make me?" The raw vulnerability surprised Sarah. She reached across the table and, after a moment's hesitation, placed her hand over Eleanor's. "A human one. We all make mistakes." Eleanor looked at their hands, then back at Sarah's face. "Ethan loves you. He may not have said it yet, he's always been cautious with his heart. But I know my son, I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you." The words sent a flutter through Sarah's chest. "Our relationship is complicated." "Love always is," Eleanor said with unexpected warmth, "especially when it crosses the boundaries we think define us." Before Sarah could respond, the door opened again and Ethan entered, looking tired but relieved. He stopped short at the sight of his mother and Sarah together. "Everything okay here?" he asked cautiously. Eleanor stood, smoothing her skirt with practiced grace. "Perfectly fine," Ms. Miller and I were just getting better acquainted." She kissed her son's cheek. "I'll leave you two alone. The car is waiting to take me back to the hotel." As she reached the door, she turned back. "Sarah, I hope we'll have a chance for a proper conversation soon. Perhaps dinner once this legal business is settled." After she left, Ethan looked at Sarah in amazement. "What just happened? Did my mother actually use your first name?" Sarah smiled, still processing the conversation herself. "I think she's trying to make peace." "Miracles never cease," he said, shaking his head. "How did your statement go?" "Fine. Yours?" "Grueling but productive. They believe they have enough now to charge Alexander and Olivia with attempted murder, in addition to the fraud and corporate espionage charges." He sat heavily in the chair Eleanor had vacated, fatigue evident in his movements. Despite his progress, he was still recovering, and the day had taken its toll. "Bennett says we can go back to the safe house now. They'll contact us when there." "Our developments." Sarah studied his face, noting the dark circles under his eyes and the tension in his shoulders. "What you need is rest. Real rest, not just physical therapy and legal meetings." "What I need," he said, looking up at her with sudden intensity, "is for this to be over. I need to stop being a victim, a case number, a recovery project. I need to start living again, really living." The longing in his voice touched something deep within Sarah. For all his privilege and wealth, Ethan Thompson had been robbed of the most basic human right, the freedom to live without fear. "We'll get there," she promised, "one day at a time." As they prepared to leave the federal building, Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Martha. "Turn on the news, right now." Confused, Sarah asked one of the agents if they could see a television. They were quickly escorted to a room where a large screen showed a breaking news report. The headline made them both freeze in place. "Alexander Thompson and Olivia Rothschild apprehended in Brazil." The reporter explained that the couple had been captured trying to board a yacht registered to a known arms dealer. Brazilian authorities, working with Interpol, had taken them into custody and were beginning extradition proceedings. Images flashed on the screen. Alexander, his face contorted with rage as officers led him away. Olivia, head down, her designer, clothes disheveled, her perfect image finally shattered. "It's over," Ethan said softly. "It's really over." Sarah turned to him, seeing the weight of months of fear and betrayal finally lifting from his shoulders. "Now we can start living again." As they left the building under the protection of federal agents, Sarah felt a curious lightness. The danger was passing, justice was being served, and the future, uncertain as it still was, held promise rather than threat. What that future would look like for her and Ethan remained to be seen. The bridge between their worlds was still being built, one moment of understanding at a time. But as they drove away from Manhattan, the setting sun painting the sky in brilliant hues of pink and gold, Sarah allowed herself to hope that the story that began in the quiet of room 507 would continue to unfold, not as a fairy tale of the cleaning lady and the billionaire, but as the real-life journey of two people who had found each other in the most unexpected of circumstances. 3 months had passed since the arrests of Alexander, Olivia, and Michael Davis. Winter had settled over New York City, transforming the urban landscape with a blanket of pristine snow. Christmas decorations adorned the streets, and a spirit of renewal filled the air. For Ethan Thompson, the season truly felt like rebirth. His physical recovery had progressed remarkably. He now walked without assistance, his speech was completely normal, and he had regained most of his strength. The doctors called his recovery extraordinary, though privately, Ethan attributed much of his progress to Sarah's unwavering support and encouragement. Thompson Tech was also recovering. With Hadilai, Alexander and his co-conspirators awaiting trial, the company had stabilized under Ethan's careful guidance. The Project Phoenix technology, the revolutionary AI system that Michael Davis had tried to steal, was now being properly developed, with a launch planned for the spring. But the greatest transformation had been in Ethan's personal life. The ordeal had stripped away pretense and forced him to reevaluate everything he thought he knew about love, loyalty, and what truly mattered. One snowy evening in December, Ethan stood at the window of his penthouse, watching the city lights twinkle below. The place had been completely redecorated, gone were the cold modern furnishings Olivia had selected, replaced with warmer colors and comfortable pieces that reflected his true taste. "Penny for your thoughts," Sarah said, joining him at the window. She handed him a mug of hot chocolate topped with whipped cream, a simple pleasure he'd never indulged in before meeting her. "Just thinking about how different everything is from last Christmas," he replied, slipping an arm around her waist. "I was engaged to a woman who didn't love me, surrounded by people who wanted to use me, living a life that looked perfect but felt empty." Sarah leaned her head against his shoulder. "And now? Now I have less money, more security precautions, and regular physical therapy appointments," he said with a wry smile. "But I'm happier than I've ever been." In the months since the arrests, Sarah had moved into the penthouse, reluctantly at first, concerned about moving too quickly and about the public perception. But practical considerations won out. The security team insisted Ethan shouldn't live alone during the trial preparations, and Sarah's small apartment was too far from the medical facilities he still needed to visit regularly. What had begun as a temporary arrangement had gradually evolved into something permanent. Sarah's books now filled the shelves alongside Ethan's. Her favorite armchair sat beside the fireplace. Her simple, practical approach to life had transformed the once sterile penthouse into a real home. "Have you thought about my suggestion?" Ethan asked, referring to a conversation they'd had earlier that week. Sarah sighed. "I have, but I'm still not sure. I don't know anything about charitable foundations." Ethan had proposed that Sarah head a new Thompson Foundation initiative focused on supporting medical caregivers and family members of long-term patients. The idea had come to him after hearing her stories about other patients at St. Luke's who, unlike him, had no one to advocate for them when they couldn't speak for themselves. "You know more than you think," he insisted. "You lived it. Who better to understand what families need during those crisis times? But I don't have the credentials. The education, you have something more valuable, experience and empathy. The business side can be learned." Sarah was still uncertain. After leaving her hospital job, she had struggled to find her footing in Ethan's world. She had briefly taken a position coordinating his medical care and rehabilitation, but as he recovered, that role had naturally diminished. While she cherished their relationship, she yearned for purpose beyond being Ethan Thompson's girlfriend. "Just think about it," Ethan said, kissing her forehead. "No pressure." Their quiet evening was interrupted by a call from Jake, who still handled many of the day-to-day operations at Thompson Tech, while Ethan focused on his recovery. "Turn on Channel 6, Jake said without preamble. "Olivia's giving an interview from jail." They rushed to the television just in time to see Olivia Rothschild, looking far less glamorous than in her society days, but still managing to appear poised in her prison jumpsuit. The interviewer was asking about her relationship with Ethan. "Of course I loved him," Olivia was saying, her voice dripping with practiced sincerity. "But Ethan changed after he took over the company. He became obsessed with power, with control. Our relationship suffered. Alexander was the only one who understood how difficult it was for me." "Is she serious?" Sarah exclaimed, outraged. "She's still lying, even after everything that's come out?" Ethan remained calm, watching his former fiancée with detached interest, like a scientist observing a particularly deceptive specimen. "She's always been good at rewriting reality to cast herself as the victim." The interviewer, to his credit, challenged her version of events. "Court documents show you were involved in planning what prosecutors are calling a murder attempt against Mr. Thompson. How do you explain that?" Olivia's composure faltered slightly. "Those allegations are taken completely out of context. I never wanted to harm Ethan. Alexander and Michael manipulated me, used my emotional vulnerability against me. And the emails where you referred to Mr. Thompson as the final obstacle?" A poor choice of words. "I meant he was an obstacle to our happiness because he wouldn't let go of the relationship that was clearly over." Ethan turned off the television, shaking his head. "Some people never change." "Does it bother you?" Sarah asked carefully. Hearing her lie about you like that? Honestly? No. He turned to face her. There was a time when Olivia's opinion of me mattered, when I measured my worth through her eyes and the eyes of people like her, but that time is long gone. He pulled Sarah close, his eyes intense. The only person whose opinion I care about now is standing right in front of me. Sarah felt her heart swell with love for this man who had traveled such a difficult journey from the unconscious patient she'd first met. Well, my opinion is that you're pretty wonderful, even if you do have ridiculous ideas. About me running a foundation. Ethan laughed, the sound warm and genuine. We'll revisit that topic later. Right now we have dinner reservations at that little Italian place you love. As they prepared to leave, Jake called again. Just a heads up, the media got wind of your dinner plans. There are photographers staking out the restaurant. Since the arrests and the revelation of the murder plot, public interest in Ethan Thompson had intensified. The story had everything: wealth, betrayal, attempted murder, and romance. Sarah's role had been particularly fascinating to the tabloids, which had dubbed her the Guardian Angel, after the full story of her bedside vigils came to light. We could order in instead, Sarah suggested, hesitant to face the cameras. While Ethan had lived with public attention all his life, she still found it uncomfortable. No, Ethan said firmly, we're not hiding. This is our life, and I won't let a few photographers dictate how we live it. When they arrived at the restaurant, the flash of cameras greeted them as expected. Ethan guided Sarah inside with a protective arm around her waist, ignoring the shouted questions from reporters. The restaurant owner, an elderly Italian man named Giuseppe, greeted them warmly and led them to a secluded corner table. I keep the vultures away, Mr. Thompson, he promised with a wink. You and your lady enjoy peaceful dinner. Over candlelight and excellent pasta, they managed to forget about the outside world for a while. Ethan marveled, not for the first time, at how easy it was to be with Sarah. Unlike the orchestrated dates with Olivia, which always felt like performances for an invisible audience, time with Sarah was genuine, sometimes messy, occasionally challenging but always real. What? Sarah asked, noticing his thoughtful gaze. I was just thinking how lucky I am that dog ran into the road that day, she raised an eyebrow. You're lucky you almost died. I'm lucky something disrupted the path I was on, he clarified. I was heading toward a life that looked successful, but would have been empty. Sometimes it takes a catastrophe to redirect us to where we're meant to be. That's a pretty philosophical take on a traumatic brain injury, she teased. I had a lot of time to think while I was learning to walk again, he replied with a smile. And I decided that when I was fully recovered, I wouldn't waste any more time pretending to be the person others expected me to be. The intensity of his gaze made Sarah's heart beat faster. Before she could respond, Giuseppe appeared with a bottle of champagne. Compliments of the house, he announced proudly. For celebration. We're not celebrating anything particular tonight, Giuseppe, Ethan said. Just dinner. The old man smiled mysteriously. Every night is celebration when you are with the right person, no? After he left, Sarah eyed Ethan suspiciously. Did you put him up to that? I have no idea what you're talking about, Ethan replied, though his eyes twinkled with mischief. As they finished their meal, Ethan grew uncharacteristically quiet, almost nervous. When he suggested a walk through the small garden behind the restaurant, despite the cold, Sarah's suspicions grew. The garden had been transformed for the winter season, with twinkling lights wrapped around bare trees and heat lamps providing warmth against the December chill. A light snow began to fall as they walked, the flakes glistening in the soft light. Do you know what today is? Ethan asked suddenly. Sarah thought for a moment. Thursday? He smiled. It's exactly 1 year since my accident. 1 year since everything changed. Oh, she hadn't realized the significance of the date. I guess anniversaries of difficult events aren't usually celebrated. This one should be, he said softly, taking her hands in his. Because it led me to you. Sarah felt tears welling in her eyes. Ethan, when I think about how close I came to missing this, to missing us, it terrifies me, he continued. I could have married Olivia, lived that hollow life, never knowing what I was missing. or I could have died on that road, never having experienced real love. The word love hung in the air between them. They had both been careful about using it, aware of the complicated circumstances that had brought them together. The doctors said my recovery was remarkable, Ethan went on. But they don't know what I know, that it wasn't medical science that brought me back. It was you, Sarah. Your voice in the darkness, your hand holding mine, your belief that I would find my way back. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. I know it hasn't been very long. In the usual scheme of things, he said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. But when you've faced death, when you've had to fight for every step, every word, every moment, you learn not to waste time. He opened the box to reveal a ring unlike anything Sarah would have expected. Not a flashy diamond like Olivia had worn, but a simple band of rose gold with a small cluster of sapphires that matched the color of Ethan's eyes. I don't want to be your patient anymore, or your employer, or even just your boyfriend, he said. I want to be your partner, your equal, the person who stands beside you for whatever comes next. He dropped to one knee in the snow, looking up at her with all the love and certainty in his heart. Sarah Miller, will you marry me? For a moment, Sarah was too overwhelmed to speak. This man, who could have anyone, who belonged to a world so different from her own, was offering her his heart, his name, his future. People will talk, she said finally, voicing her deepest fear. They'll say I took advantage of you, that I manipulated my way into your life when you were vulnerable. Let them talk, Ethan said firmly. We know the truth, and anyone who matters already understands what we mean to each other. He stood, still holding the ring. I'm not asking you to become someone you're not. I fell in love with Sarah Miller, the woman who was brave enough to speak to a stranger in the darkness. That's who I want to spend my life with. The sincerity in his voice dissolved her last doubts. Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes, I'll marry you. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, the snow fell around them like a blessing, covering the world in pristine white, a blank page on which to write their future. Unknown to them, in the shadows of the garden, a photographer captured the moment. The next morning, their engagement would make headlines, but for once the stories would be filled with hope rather than scandal, a fitting new chapter in what the public had come to call the Thompson miracle. 6 months later, on a perfect June day, Sarah stood in a dressing room at the Thompson estate, hardly recognizing her reflection. The woman in the mirror wore a simple but elegant wedding gown, her hair swept up with a few tendrils framing her face. Martha fussed with the veil, while Eleanor Thompson adjusted the necklace she had insisted Sarah wear, a family heirloom passed down through generations of Thompson brides. Something borrowed, Eleanor said with uncharacteristic sentimentality. It brought me luck in my marriage. I hope it does the same for you and Ethan. The relationship between Sarah and her future mother-in-law had evolved gradually from cool politeness to genuine respect and eventually something approaching affection. Eleanor would probably never be the warm, demonstrative mother figure Sarah had lost years ago, but she had proven herself a loyal ally when the media scrutiny of their engagement turned harsh. Are you ready? Martha asked. It's almost time. Sarah took a deep breath. As ready as I'll ever be. The garden ceremony was small by Thompson standards, only 100 guests instead of the 500 Olivia had planned for her wedding to Ethan. The difference reflected Sarah's influence and Ethan's new priorities. As Sarah walked down the aisle on Jake's arm, he had insisted on giving her away, saying it was his duty as Ethan's best friend and her co-conspirator. She saw familiar faces among the guests. Dr. Peterson sat with his wife, beaming proudly. Rachel Davis recovered from her attack and now running her father's company in a more ethical direction, smiled encouragingly. Even Giuseppe from the restaurant was there, dabbing at his eyes with an embroidered handkerchief. But Sarah's focus was entirely on Ethan, waiting for her beneath an arch of white roses. The transformation in him since that first day in room 507 was remarkable. Gone was the vulnerable patient, the struggling survivor. The man who watched her approach was strong, confident, and radiating happiness. When she reached him, he took her hands, his eyes never leaving hers. the judge who had been asked to officiate, the same one who had sentenced Alexander to 20 years in prison for attempted murder, began the ceremony with a smile. We are gathered here today to witness the union of two people whose journey to this moment has been extraordinary. Ethan and Sarah have chosen to write their own vows, which they will share now. Ethan spoke first, his voice clear and steady. Sarah, 1 year and 7 months ago I was lost in darkness. My body was broken, my mind adrift, but somehow your voice reached me. You spoke to me of kindness, of hope, of everyday wonders that most of us take for granted. You read to me when others had abandoned me. You fought for me when others had given up. Today I promise to do the same for you, to be your voice when you cannot speak, your strength when you falter, your advocate when the world doubts you. I promise to listen, really listen, as you listened to me even when I couldn't respond. I promise to build a life with you based on truth, respect, and the kind of love that doesn't fade when the cameras turn away or when the path becomes difficult. I was half alive before I met you. Today, I give my whole heart, my whole self, to our future together. Tears slipped down Sarah's cheeks as she began her vows. Ethan, when I first spoke to you in that hospital room, I had no idea I was beginning a conversation that would change both our lives. I was just a cleaning lady who couldn't bear to see someone alone in their darkest hour. Today, I promise to always be that person who sees you, truly sees you, not as a CEO or a Thompson or any of the labels the world places on you, but as the man whose spirit was strong enough to find its way back from the edge of darkness. I promise to stand beside you, not behind you or in front of you, as we face whatever life brings next. I promise to remind you of the simple joys when the complexities of life become overwhelming. To be honest with you, even when the truth is difficult. To love you not for what you can give me, but for who you are and who we become together. I never believed in fairy tales, but I do believe in us, in the miracle of finding connection in the most unexpected places, and in the power of love to heal what seems broken beyond repair. As they exchanged rings, a sense of rightness settled over the gathering. This union, born in the strangest of circumstances, somehow made perfect sense to everyone who had witnessed their journey. By the power vested in me, the judge concluded, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Ethan, you may kiss your bride. The kiss they shared wasn't just a seal on their marriage. It was a promise, a beginning, a declaration that the most valuable things in life often come disguised as our greatest challenges. At the reception, Jake raised his glass for a toast. To Ethan and Sarah. Proof that sometimes the worst day of your life can lead to the best thing that ever happened to you. Later, as they shared their first dance, Ethan held Sarah close, still amazed that the woman in his arms had become his. Wife, happy? He asked. Beyond words, she replied, though I still can't believe Eleanor Thompson is now my mother-in-law, he laughed. She's coming around. Yesterday, she actually referred to you as that remarkable girl instead of the hospital employee. Progress, Sarah agreed with a smile. As the evening continued, Sarah stepped away for a moment of quiet. She found herself in the same garden where 1 year before, Ethan had crashed his car on the way to marry another woman. Life's twists and turns never ceased to amaze her. Ethan found her there, slipping his jacket around her shoulders against the cool evening air. What are you thinking about, Mrs. Thompson? He asked, the new name still sounding wonderfully strange to both of them. About room 507, she answered honestly. About how sometimes the greatest love stories begin in the unlikeliest of places. He took her hand, the one now bearing his ring. Our story isn't a fairy tale, he said thoughtfully. It's better, it's real, built on truth and tested by fire. As they walked back toward the celebration, toward their future together, Sarah knew he was right. Their path hadn't been easy or conventional, but it had led them exactly where they were meant to be, together, stronger for the challenges they had faced, ready for whatever came next. In the soft summer twilight, surrounded by people who had become family in the truest sense of the word, Sarah and Ethan Thompson began the next chapter of their extraordinary journey, not as patient and caregiver, not as billionaire and cleaning lady, but as partners who had found in each other the most precious gift of all, a love that had awakened them both to the fullness of life's possibilities. The end.